Hello everybody. What, Where, Why is usually a Patreon exclusive series. However, this specific episode contains information essential to understanding future episodes of the Snack Covenant. So Sophie and Sin put it on YouTube for everybody. If you want more What, Where, Why, head over to patreon.com/Sinclair Lore, in which you can find such theories as What, Where, Why, Enemies of Bloodborne, What, Where, Why, Locations of Bloodborne, and, coming soon, What, Where, Why, Doors of Bloodborne. We hope you enjoy the episode.
As people may or may not know, you still have a couple of episodes of Bloodborne Up Close left to record.
Couple.
While waiting for Sophie to create her art, in the meantime, we actually have a series that could sorta look at what Sophie's looking at under a different lens.
Just say it's what we're away.
So basically, the things that Sophie has left to cover, we're gonna cover them in a What, Where, Why format for now, while she's working on the Bloodborne Up Close format. So, Old Yharnam. Sophie, could you please tell me the official name in English?
Old Yharnam.
Tell me the official name in Japanese.
Old Town.
Why?
Because the old part of, Prague is called Old Town.
That's amazing. I thought they named it after the song where it's like, I'm gonna take my horse, I'm gonna ride away from home.
Yeah, we've recorded two other things today.
Could you please describe Old Yharnam?
So Old Yharnam is the old part of Yharnam. And we know it's the old part because the architecture is different. It's a little rougher, a little less refined, and it's also lower because Yharnam was built upward from very, very far below. So, as befits that, older parts of the city are lower. It looks like it's poorer as well. The buildings are smaller. It's in a little more disrepair. I mean, it's also on fire. That seems to be one of the major issues is that it's on fire. But the buildings there are a lot smaller. Doesn't have the sort of very refined detailing that you see around Yharnam. It tends to be a little rougher. The designs on the buildings are also different. The instead of the sort of the messenger gargoyles are there, but they're a lot they look more raw. They have big open mouths. They have horns. There's sort of weird monster designs everywhere. So. Mm-hmm. It's this older part of Yharnam. It's presumably also one of the poorer parts of Yharnam.
Why do you say that?
Because that's where the Healing Church sort of decide to sacrifice, essentially. Mm-hmm. And there's a river that runs through it that a lot of people don't notice initially, because you don't really... There's not an angle in which you see the river, but if you actually angle the camera down, you can look at the river, and it's pretty big. There's a massive, massive river that goes through the city.
So do you think they ever, disposed of corpses into the river?
Probably, yeah.
Wow, it's dark.
I mean, they also burned them.
Oof.
They probably disposed of them in the river and then started burning them after that. Because they're disposing of them in a river in Forbidden Woods, I think. Because all there's corpses there.
Yharnam is messed up.
You know, now that you mention it,
is there anything else you'd like to tell us about Old Yharnam and its description and its lore?
Well, it connects to Yahar'gul.
How?
Through where Pal is. You can go out of Yahar'gul and go into Old Yharnam.
But you can't go from Old Yharnam to Yahar'gul because of the little mountain.
You probably could initially.
Okay.
Because there's that other entrance to Yahar'gul that's bricked up, and that's probably part of Old Yharnam.
That's right, at the very, very end, right? With some items.
Yeah. So, like, if you think about it, Yahar'gul was probably the Old Yharnam equivalent of Cathedral Ward. Like, Old Yharnam was the residential area, and then Yahar'gul is where the churches are. Although, weirdly, like, the Church of the Good Chalice is also a massive deal, so...
Was Yahar'gul a poorer area as well?
It's very, very ornate and very extravagant in its design. But it's pretty much just churches, which makes me think like that's kind of the Cathedral Ward equivalent of Old Yharnam, because they're next to each other. Like, the thing is, the people of Old Yharnam worship the Church of the Good Chalice. They don't worship in Yahar'gul. It's possible they don't even know Yahar'gul exists. So it could be that, like, Yahar'gul's been abandoned for, like, hundreds of years at this point.
That's really interesting information. So is Yahar'gul, or was it at some point part of Old Yharnam?
They're connected.
Yeah, they're connected, but was it one city, or was it just two connected cities?
It's not really clear, because, like, they're literally right next. You can walk from one to the other. So it seems like they're connected, but, like, also I think the way that, like, I think you can read the character as, like, the hidden street, rather than the city. And, like, Yahar'gul is just a street. Like, when you look at the design, it's just a street. It starts at the bricked up wall and it ends where Mikolash is. It's just a very long line. And what you do in that area is you just unlock the various gates so that you go in a straight line.
You know what it makes me think of?
What?
Secret street, meaning it's like under everyone's noses, but nobody really knows it's there unless you're like in the know. Like, it's almost like there's a cult that lives there.
Yeah. So there is a cult that lives there. Called the School of Mensis, and they play quite an integral role in the story. So I think you're onto something.
What I meant is before Menses moved in, maybe this was like another cult, another...
Yeah, but there probably was.
Whoa!
No, but another thing, right, about the connection between them is that Yahar'gul is full of kin imagery. It's got, like, everything's like amygdala statues. Obviously, some of them seem to have been brought there, but there's, like, massive amygdala statues. The gargoyles have amygdala heads. There's all these little statues that look like slugs. In contrast to Old Yharnam, which is all beasts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible that, like, that is what happened. That Old Yharnam is a remnant of, like, there was some sort of schism. And there were a bunch of, like, you know, Bergenworth-esque kin worshippers in Yahar'gul, and they split from Old Yharnam, and Old Yharnam went back to the beast blood worship.
Interesting. So, if we go back to Old Yharnam, when was it built, you'd say?
Before the rest of Yharnam.
And who built it?
The Yharnamites.
Were Thumerians involved in building it?
Well, I think at that point they'd stopped being Thumerians. Because it's quite close. It's above the surface. And it's not even, like, the closest thing to the surface. Because you can see if you look down, like, the river is down quite low, so there's probably, like, other stuff down there. The whole point is, like, people of Old Yharnam worship, like, the chalice. So there's these remnants of those rituals. It's more like Thumeru than the rest of Yharnam, which is possible. I think that's probably another reason why they chose it.
Sorry, why who chose it?
The Healing Church.
And could you elaborate on that a little bit, what you're talking about exactly?
One of the things about, like, the Healing Church in Old Yharnam is that this isn't ever... no one outright says this, but, like, it is true. This is like, pretty indisputably what happened based on, like... They give you just a ton of circumstantial evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the thing about Old Yharnam is that was deliberately infected with the beast blood by the church. I think it was chosen because the people there were already obsessed with blood worship. And also, it's like a poor place, and it's a place they could very easily just seal off. So they seeded beast blood pellets all over it, and then they basically wanted to see what would happen when the blood sort of went active, and that's why it's full of beasts now. And that's sort of the first time it had happened on that level, and it's why, like, Dura's whole thing is he and the other powder kegs showed up before, like, they knew what had happened. And they went through the city killing all the beasts, and then they realized what had happened. They didn't realize the beasts were the people of Old Yharnam. They probably thought the beasts were attacking Old Yharnam. So when Dura has the realization that all these beasts are actually people, that's what makes him change. And say, no, I have to stop people killing the beasts. So it was this unprecedented thing, and it's like sort of foreshadowing what ends up happening to the rest of Yharnam.
Thank you, Sophie. The last what question is, which materials were used?
Stone. Bricks, those are becoming a very popular material when discussing... Do you remember? We did one of the parts of Old Yharnam is why, and you started arguing about the roof.
No, I don't remember.
I remember it very distinctly because I got very frustrated with you.
What did I say?
You were insisting something about the roof of the church, like it was made of. You didn't know what it was made of because it had collapsed. And then...
Oh my god! Thank you, Sophie.
Yeah, water in the river, trees.
Those are like natural elements.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of more like man-made stuff.
Some of the trees were probably planted.
Oh, did they use any wood from the trees to build anything around?
Well, I don't know, because they look like they're decorative trees. I don't think you could really get lumber from them. It's the opposite of Forbidden Woods. Because Forbidden Woods only has trees, and all the stones rotting away, and this only has stone and all the woods rotting away.
How ironic.
Yeah.
A fitting end.
Fitting end.
So the what section is normally ended here. However, since this is a special What Where Why Located
This is a special therapy episode.
Sophie, in your research for Bloodborne Up Close, did you find anything about any topic, any suggestion, any lore, any thought that you could fit into the what?
I think we sort of covered it with all the like Yahar'gul connection stuff.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sam.
Now let's move on to where. Where is it located?
You know Yharnam. You go down a bit, but not so far down that you're underground. And that. Can I actually like fill you in on something about Old Yharnam that's kind of interesting? If you look out onto the horizon, right, you see a lot of like other parts of Yharnam that you don't go to.
Okay.
They're pretty much all copies of Old Yharnam. Like they just get Old Yharnam and they copy and paste it a whole lot in the distance. And I think that's supposed to like... It's supposed to signify that like, yeah, most of Yharnam actually looks like Old Yharnam. And the part we explore is like the inner sort of richer area. That looks like it was probably enriched by trading, which we talked about before. Because where like all the aqueducts and the docks are. Whereas Old Yharnam is like, I don't know what Old Yharnam actually did, like what its economy was.
Stoves.
Hi, Sophie here. Sin just adopted a very knowing tone when she mentioned the stove. That's because unlike other Souls YouTubers who quote-unquote moved on or quote-unquote got married, Sin and I have a little something called integrity. And consequently, we have been covering every aspect of this game years after anyone stopped caring, and From have done 3 different games, it doesn't matter. So yeah, there's an episode on the stove. You know, there's like a little fireplace in Old Yharnam. That's an episode. There was a guest and everything. Aegon is still playing Dark Souls 3. Ask yourself, who do you trust? Exactly. Back to the podcast.
Maybe the reason Old Yharnam's the way it is because, like, it is that place that doesn't have contact with the world outside.
Hmm.
It is a very insular sort of old place, so they keep like the beast worship going there, whereas they don't keep that going in the upper parts. And probably also that, again, like it being a poorer place, right? Poorer because it's not really, doesn't have much economic contact. It doesn't really seem to trade or do anything. It's actually literally closed off. It's in a valley. Like there's no real way in or out of it other than the way that we take. So it's almost like a ghetto in some ways. Like it's just this like very closed off space. Whereas if you look at like Yharnam, there's like these massive streets and canals and things that go off into the distance.
Thank you, Sophie. Now let's move on to where? Where is it located?
You know Yharnam? The central
No.
Yharnam? Okay.
No.
So Yharnam, there's a central Yharnam, that's where we start. And from
What's
there...
a Yhar'gul?
What's a Yharnam? Yharnam has pretty shoes. So Old Yharnam is underneath Central Yharnam. And Central Yharnam is underneath Cathedral Ward.
Whoa!
Whoa.
And where did the Healing Church set up its main base of operation?
The Grand Cathedral.
Yeah, so they set it up in the Grand Cathedral. And is that the richest part of Yharnam?
It looks like it.
But earlier we said they set it up in Old Yharnam because it's poorer, so they can
No, but
mess with people?
their base is in the Grand Cathedral. The way they mess with Old Yharnam is they got people to go and leave beast blood lying around.
Okay. So they don't do the same thing in Cathedral Ward.
They do the same thing in Forbidden Woods, and I think they probably would do Cathedral Ward if Forbidden Woods didn't work out.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you. And the same question, in your Bloodborne Up Close research, did you find anything interesting about the where?
Well, pretty much what I said before, where like most of Yharnam seems to look like Old Yharnam. So it's like, it's the old part, it's the insular part, it's the poor part. And most of Yharnam seems to, like, we call it Yharnam, but like it's actually specifically Central Yharnam, Cathedral Ward, and Old Yharnam. So like Central Yharnam is not necessarily representative of the whole of Yharnam. It's just the central part. It's like, and being the central part, obviously, like it is the richest part. It is the part that's getting the most contact with the outside world. Like any city, the central part is where most of the action's going on. And then like Old Yharnam is basically, it's like one of like the outer suburbs of Yharnam.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sam.
So now let's move on to why.
Okay.
Why was it built?
Where? So this is like, I'm answering this question even though it's a troll question. This sort of connects with what I was saying before, where like Old Yharnam is a city. It's like a very, Gurman calls it a hamlet. Like it's a very small city in a valley, and it, like I said, doesn't seem to have much contact with the outside world apart from the church. So it's like, it's a city that's like, it's like basically a road leading to a church with some buildings along it. So it was built as a place for people to live and worship. It's like a little self-contained place. And that, I think, like I was saying, it differentiates it from the rest of Central Yharnam, because Central Yharnam is a place that's built to have contact with the outside world. Like it's full of very long, wide roads. It's full of aqueducts. It has docks for boats. It seems to be near the sea. So you can say, okay, the purpose of Central Yharnam is like that's where all the trade is going, there's all this important stuff's going on. Old Yharnam is somewhere that is away from that. Like it's a place built around worship. So you might think, and this is like an interesting thing that it's doing with the design, you might think, well, okay, in the case of most cities, what would happen is you would start at the place with the trade. You would start like near the river or something, or the trading is going on, and everything's built up around there, and then as it goes outward, places are getting, like, I guess they're sort of getting poorer because they're further and further from the center of everything's going on. But Yharnam's actually the opposite of that, because the places down the bottom, like Yharnam started at the bottom, it started in Thumaru, and it built upward. So actually the rich part that is engaging with the outside world that people are stopping to see is the newer part. So it's actually like it's like an upside down version of how that would work if it were like a normal city.
Amazing. Thank you, Sophie. So, what's its current purpose?
Its current purpose is to be quarantined.
Thank you, Sophie. Who utilized it before?
Humans.
Who utilizes it now?
Beasts and dead humans.
So now, before we proceed to the optional question, is there anything else you'd like to add in any category, any thoughts or lore about Old Yharnam?
It's sort of referenced in the Hunter's Nightmare, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Because the River of Blood, right? The River of Blood is like a sort of... It's not a metaphor because it's literal. Like, it's one of those things, like it's a metaphor that's made literal of what the Healing Church have done. Where, like, what they have done is there is just this river of blood that is going downstream, representing, like, the city gradually falling to pieces as this river flows throughout it. And the end of that river is the cave. And in the cave, there's a bunch of beast patients. There's the blood-starved beast, and there's a guy with a Gatling gun, which is what Old Yharnam is like.
Right.
So it's like, basically as, like, awful shit is happening, it's being kind of restructured in the nightmare. So, like, Old Yharnam seems to be kind of... If you view the nightmares, like, if you view its geography as also its chronology, Old Yharnam looks like it happened, like, right before the people of Yharnam turned on the church and Lawrence disappeared.
Thank you, Sophie. And now let's move on to the optional question.
Alrighty.
If the location has no name, make up a name for it at the end of the episode.
Beastburg.
You know, I was actually thinking something with beast, and you said it. Beastburg.
Yeah. It's like a reference to Undead Burg from Dark Souls, but now it's Beastburg.
Berg, Bergen, Worth, Beastburg. It all comes together. Oh my god! Sophie!
What?
They're rivaling universities!
Oh, what's the fucking Old Yharnam University like?
Beastburg University, yes, because, okay...
Where is it?
In Old Yharnam?
Where?
The place where we fight the, Bloodstarved Beast?
It's a church.
No, it's a university.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, there's a church on the way there, so, like, maybe that is a university and they just hid there after they got chased out of the church.
There we go.
You know, also the Healing Church is a church that's a university.
So it's okay, so it's fine.
Yeah.
And, okay, Sophie, because you have Bergenworth, Dignity City, and they're all about enlightenment, and they're all about, like, elevating their mind and blah, 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 and they turn into
question of blood versus insight.
Sorry, I don't know what came over me.
And then we have Beastburg, and they're the opposite. They're like, no, it's cool to be a beast. We're going to drink all this blood, we're going to turn into beasts, and we're going to party, and we're going to have a good time.
So it's like Animal House.
What's that?
It's like the rowdy frat boys. What if it's the other Bergenworth campus?
Hello there, Hidetaka Miyazaki here, creator of... Which one is this? Bloodborne. Apparently, the two hosts of this podcast have decided that the real name of Bergenworth is Dignity City. I don't care. I hated Bergenworth because it was full of nerds. And I spent the most of development trying to get rid of it. That's why most of it is currently floating in a purple void. I am glad that they picked Dignity City as the name, though, because people will know from interviews with me that when I'm collaborating with artists and designers, I always tell them you need to emphasize dignity in the bosses. This is best illustrated in Sekiro when you have to fight a giant fighting ape that throws turds. Can I go now? I hope you have a pleasant day.
I'm just imagining, like, there's some important visiting dignitary going to Bergenworth. And he's like, well, Willem, I trust nothing unforeseen will happen during my visit. He said, oh, don't worry. I've expelled the rowdy members from our Old Yharnam campus. And then, like, the blood-starved beast, like, swings in through the windows. Willem!
Sophie, do the outro.
That was What Where Why Locations of Bloodborne episode 23, Old Yharnam. An impromptu episode Sin did to make me confront my demons.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sin.
And thank you everyone for listening. And see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.